Welcome to the Get Trauma Informed podcast, dedicated to unraveling the complexities of trauma, its pervasive impact, and the journey towards holistic recovery and realignment. If your radiance has ever felt muted, like I and thousands of others, you're in the right place to reignite your inner light. I'm your host, Wellness Coach Liz Blanding, and this is the Get Trauma Informed podcast. Hi, and welcome to a very special episode of the Get Trauma Informed podcast. And why do I say it's a special episode? Because I have the opportunity to share a conversation with my coach, my mentor, my friend, my family member, and just such an amazing, amazing, amazing person. He gives so much of himself to the world. How are you today, Coach Michael Bart Mathews?
I am fine, Wellness Coach Liz, and I appreciate you taking the time out and offering me a platform to speak with your audience today.
Absolutely. Well, we are walking through our fantastic book, The Pathway to Trauma Recovery, right? And so Coach Michael Bart Mathews, he is actually chapter number 2. We're going to get into that a little bit later. But the purpose for this series is to walk through each chapter and to walk through what each author experienced. And we have authors all over the world in the pathway to trauma recovery. And I'm just so grateful that Coach Michael Bart Mathews, who is manuscript development coach and the owner or president, CEO of We Create Books. How are you today? We talked about that. I already said that. You know what, guys? You get a little bit nervous when your mentor and your coach is right face to face with you, and you have the opportunity to be in the interviewer seat. So, forgive me today if I go a little long or if I stumble over a couple of words. But we're going to get through this interview today. Coach Michael Bart Mathews, what does Get Trauma Informed mean to you?
Well, Get Trauma Informed means to me, at first, I never knew what trauma really was, first of all. So let's back up before I actually answer the question to give a little of my background text on trauma. I've experienced trauma in my childhood, in my adolescence, in my young adult, and in my baby boomer gray hair years, which most of us have already. But when you're going through those different wonder years of my life, I didn't understand the issues, setbacks, experiences that I was experiencing during those 4 growth periods of my life has affected my ability to perform at higher levels because I didn't understand what it was meaning trauma. So I carried that 100 pounds of baggage through all 4 of those life periods because I didn't understand what trauma was until in my baby boomer years. So just to get through the struggles of trauma, not knowing what it really was, and finally be able to understand what trauma informed really means. It means issues that you might have went through as a child. You might have had a bad parent, or you might have been bullied, for example, or you might have been in a plane crash or a train wreck. Somebody might have robbed you, or somebody you know might have been killed. You might have been in one of the spiritual institutions and you just didn't get what you were supposed to get from your spiritual leader, and they didn't know it either. So all of those are just some examples of different periods of my life, and probably your life if you're somewhere in the world like we all are, have experienced it, but didn't really know what it was. So that's what trauma informs means to me.
Absolutely. And I like what you said, that because we look from the CDC, it says that 70 to 80% of the population have suffered trauma. And I think, becoming aware of it is the first thing, because oftentimes we're walking through life and we don't even understand that we are making decisions because of, or a reflection of some of the traumas that we faced. And I think that's why the project Pathway to Trauma Recovery is so important and is so vital. I'm getting so much positive feedback that people are being able to hear their story in the author's voice. And we're going to walk through each author's chapter, not only discovering the types of trauma, the different types of trauma that they've gone through, but we're also going to look at how they overcame that trauma and got on the other side. So I am so grateful to be a part of this project with you, Coach Michael. It's been such an honor, and it actually pulled up some things that were still buried inside of me. And we know that trauma is progressive, so we need to get it up and out. And this is another way to get it up and out. So thank you for that, and thank you for being here today. When we go into your chapter, we talk about how to win in the game of life, and you go into some of your childhood story. Can you go through a little bit of that with us? Because for some people that have not read the book, and I told them at the beginning when I released the first episode that we were going to go into this journey of walking there, that we weren't going to give them everything. We're just going to give them a teaser so they can come back and grab the book. So let's give them a teaser of what your story is all about, sir.
Okay, well, as you all heard, she said my childhood. So let me just stick on that one portion of my life first, and then we continue to progress as the show progress. I'll just give you one great example in my childhood. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, in an African American neighborhood. Went to an African American church, African American school, African American stores, African American everything, except the ruling force in the community, meaning the police, paramedics, fire, and those people were non-African American. I have nothing against any nationality. Don't get me wrong. I'm just letting you know how I grew up. And so, and my being that they were the authoritarians in the neighborhood when something went wrong, outside of the big brothers or the big sisters and the parents in the neighborhood. So that was a traumatic experience too, because they really didn't know how to deal with the community, because they came in and worked in the community and then went home and had a good time. But here's a real quick story. My family is from the South. My parents traveled north to Chicago across the Mason-Dixie line to escape the trauma of Jim Crow, the Jim Crow laws back in the 50s and 60s. And it's just a fact. And that carries some of that trauma over to us. But when we used to travel down south, this one particular time will never escape me. And it's a trauma-informed situation. But I didn't know it was trauma back then. We didn't understand that in the South, there were colored washrooms and white washrooms. And if you were colored, you cannot use a white washroom or a water fountain. And we never knew that. So at the first stop in Effingham, Illinois, which is the southern tip of Illinois going into St. Louis, which is considered the South, we stopped at a gas station. And my sister jumped out the car and ran, and she wanted to get a drink of water so bad. And she went to the white water fountain. And there were 6 white men on the porch with shotguns, and they all stood up. My father's pumping gas, watching. My sister's running, and my mom took off behind her like she was Wilma Rudolph. And I'm glad she was a track star, because she grabbed my sister in the back of the car just before she touched that white drinking fountain. So the white men who had the shotgun sat back down, but they still held their shotguns. And they only looked at my mom and my sister. So when my moms took her into the colored-only bathroom and came back out, my father finished pumping the gas. He took me and my brother into the colored-only bathrooms, came out, and we left. But then we got in the car, and that was our first lesson of traumatic racism from the North versus the South, because we got a tongue lashing about to be aware of your surroundings, because the first part of being trauma informed is being trauma aware. So that was my first young age of being trauma aware of trauma happening if you do certain things in certain places from a cultural perspective or whatever. So that's what happened that I stand out for me in my childhood.
Wow, that was so full. That was so full right there. And Coach Michael Bart Mathews, he is a phenomenal storyteller, right? He puts you right there, because I could actually feel myself being in that space when your mom grabbed your sister. So, and then we think about that in trauma. That was the first, I guess, if you will, installment of what we talk about when we talk about, even talk about complex PTSD. We're talking about trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. That is another way, and we're not aware of it because it's like something happened and then we move forward. And oftentimes, like you said, other than the tongue lashing that you got or that the children got, that was the only kind of no real like coaching or anything away from trauma that kind of took you into trauma. Like, oh, wait a minute, something here is different. Wow, thank you for that. Thank you for that. And as you continue to walk through your chapter, you talk about some other traumas in your adolescence, and then some of the traumas that went from when you were talking about, playing professional sports, and some trauma that happened around that. Can you give us a little bit about that?
Well, really quickly in high school too, before even the professional sports level came, I played high school sports as well, and I was on a city championship, state championship team. I was an all-star in the state of Illinois during my years of graduation. But there was a behind-the-scenes, really quick trauma story that happened that nobody knew back then that I experienced. One day, my girlfriend, God rest her soul, name it. For this story, we'll call her Mickey. She lived in the projects. Again, I'm not knocking people who lived in the projects. Some of the most prominent people grew up in the projects, and they're running cities, countries, aldermen and senators and things of that nature to this very day. So, but I had never went down there to visit her parents, and her moms wanted to see me before we won the state championship game because we was getting a lot of press and pub and in the newspapers. So, in Chicago, there's a slogan saying, if you're not from around here, you just down here. That means they know that you don't belong here. So when I came down for the first time and broke my cardinal rule, because we have an internal guiding system that we can listen to. Either you can listen to it or not. For 4 years, I listened to it. But because this was a special occasion for my girlfriend and her family, along with us, with playing basketball, I decided to go meet her parents. Long story short, went up to the 18th floor, great dinner, family, friends, everybody came out. But on the way down, it was 18 to 20 little kids. They looked like kids, but they all had handguns. As soon as I stepped off the elevator, they put the gun up to my head like this, and he actually cocked the trigger. So close your eyes and listen. Click, 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 click. You can hear that trigger clicking. I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? And then as they were robbing us, they was talking to my girlfriend, Mickey, and they said, look, if you and the big fella tell on us, we're going to come back and get your family because you live in the building. So somebody came back and started shooting up in the air and ran them away. But they stopped in haste to turn back and started shooting at us. I knocked Mickey down to the ground. Then she starts hollering because she was shot. I'm like, oh my God, what happened? So I'm about 16, 17 years old, not knowing what to do. That guardian angel helped me to pick Mickey up, put her in the car, take her to the hospital and say gunshot wound. So when you say gunshot wound, they automatically call the police, right? So happens my Mickey was okay, but they had us to try to identify people in mugshots. And Mickey said, Mike, remember what they said. If we tell on them, they're going to come back and get our family. So I couldn't tell. Long story short, we win the city championship, state championship, all-star game. I go off to college. My freshman year at college, I get a call or a letter. I don't remember. But I got notified that Nikki, my girlfriend then, had got killed in a head-on car accident. So can you imagine a 17-year-old going through those two traumatic experiences, now knowing at a young age the love of his life is no longer in his life? Then I didn't have any spiritual coaching. I didn't have any coaching from my coach. My parents said the right thing, but what can they really do about that? That's something you have to go through. So those were a traumatic experience in my high school years that went over to playing college basketball and then playing professional basketball overseas in Europe, not the NBA. I want to make that distinction clear that there's trauma on the court as well. So I was dealing with trauma off the court, then trauma on the court, playing against the number one players in the nation, trying to make the team. And they have this great level of experience over somebody who's a rookie saying, you can't make it, you're not good enough, you're not going to make the team, you're not going to amount to anything. So now there's a whole totally different set of trauma issues that can stop a person in their tracks if they don't know their why, their reason or purpose or goal or dream. Now, if I would have had trauma-informed spiritual leaders, coaches, practitioners, or therapists in my life at that time to help me deal with that, things might have been different along my journey. But I didn't get released until my baby boomer years, mentally released from the trauma. Let's get that straight. Mentally released from the trauma that I just shared with you until my adult life, but I was still able to progress and keep going without knowing what it was. But yes, as I regressed, that push rewind, it was there.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Imagine driving down the road, enjoying a beautiful day when suddenly a tree jumps out in front of your car. Crash! In an instant, your life is flipped upside down, both physically and psychologically. That was my reality. I'm Liz Blanding, a certified holistic wellness and trauma recovery coach. In a time when, according to the National Center for PTSD, the epidemic of trauma is on the rise, 70% of adults in the U.S. have experienced some type of traumatic event at least once in their lives. That's 223.4 million people who could benefit from support on their journey to recovery. To address this, I launched the Get Trauma Informed podcast in March 2024. Our podcast offers free information, resources, expert advice, and stories of those who have overcome trauma and shifted from surviving to thriving. The podcast has the capacity to reach hundreds of thousands of people. I believe that by partnering with the Get Trauma Informed podcast, we can provide critical support to many more people who need it. Trauma was not their fault, but recovery is their responsibility. And with your support, we can help them to achieve it. Thank you for considering the partnership opportunity. I look forward to the possibility of working together to make a significant impact on trauma recovery. Email us at info@oasiswellnessctrs.com or contact us at 616-320-0703. Now we will return to our Get Trauma Informed conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love what you said about, about if you had trauma informed coaching or trauma informed leadership or trauma informed spiritual guidance, someone there that could help you to unfold, unwrap, and pull out that trauma versus, we're taught to keep going, right? To put our head down and keep going. But we know that trauma is progressive. So it's going to keep, even if you swallow it, eventually it's going to come out. And oftentimes it develops into unhealthy habits because we're trying to anesthetize that pain. So I think, and Coach Michael you're so amazing with mindset. And I love that you help us to understand that, everything is in our mind. Like we can walk through a situation and it can affect everybody differently. But if you have a positive mindset and you keep moving forward, in that mindset, you can overcome, And I love your book, 52 Shades of Inspiration. I know that's not the book that we're talking about, but again, it goes to mindset. And you became a best-selling author in that book, helping people to each poem that you wrote there, it helped us to understand a more positive attitude, more positive way to move. And I think that's very key when we go into now self-care and we go into recovery. So can you talk a little bit about recovery? What does that look like?
Oh, that was a great lead into recovery. And again, let me rewind back to before I knew about trauma informed and recovery, because that's the part of the story that's most important to see that once you understand what you actually went through, you can actually go through recovery, because guess what? Trauma is not your fault, but recovery is your responsibility. And that's what happened to me. So going back through my recovery, that I didn't know I was going through recovery, the universe, God, or whoever your higher power is, led me to the personal development self-help space at a younger, early age. And I was able to use 3 avenues. Self-actualization. What does that mean to me? It may mean something different to you, but what it means to me is, who am I and where am I at right now in my life? Now, that was back then. Personal development. If you want to get better, you have to look in the mirror, like the Michael Jackson song, I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways. You have to look in the mirror of your own life, your own soul, and change your own ways first. And then it all happens around self-help. In order to do that, you have to be readers. Leaders become readers. You have to seek out. You have to seek out people like Wellness Coach Liz, and we'll share our credentials a little bit later as to why we can speak the way we're speaking on the subject of trauma when we didn't know what it was at the beginning of stages of our life. So those are three things that got me over the hump that I didn't even know I was going through trauma-informed information by taking the personal development and self-help route. But that can only take you so far. That keeps your mind positive to the greater things in life. And then once you elevate it to a trauma-informed environment, like a wellness coach Liz tricked me in a good way into becoming a certified abuse recovery coach, a certified addiction recovery coach. And what's the third one, Liz?
It is a trauma recovery practitioner.
A trauma recovery practitioner. See, that's why I can throw the ball over at her, because she tricked me into coming to this class. She said, Mike, I think you're going to really like this. She was on Zoom. She said, here's the information. It's only going to take 5 or 10 minutes and you're going to get it. 9 months later, it took 9 months later, 9 grateful months of my whole life, because now I'm able to share this information with you, because it's not about Wellness Coach Liz or I, except for our own experiences, but it's from the professional side. It's about what we have went through, what we have learned to help you go through your pathway to trauma recovery based on our expertise and learned knowledge and experiences, and being able to open up that door and let the illuminating light shine down your pathway to trauma recovery, as it has done for us and done for millions of people around the world.
Absolutely. Oh, that is absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And one thing too, when we talk about recovery, we talk about not being in isolation, because isolation is kryptonite to recovery, right? So we talk about building a community around you, a supportive community around you, so that you can have more than just your frame of reference as you're going through your recovery and as you're lifting yourself up. So Coach Mike and I, we met many, many years ago on another platform. We were introduced, and then sometimes you can just connect, and you connect on a different level, meaning that you help to make each other better. And so we talk about relationship capital. And in relationship capital, I mean, as I met Coach Mike and as he started coaching me through my first book, my first manuscript, and then, one of the things I talk about in relationship capital is integrity. And so I knew his beautiful wife, Robbie, before I actually met her, because he talked, so highly of her. And he was just a man of such great character and integrity. And it helped me in my recovery, because when we first met, I had severe trust issues. I talk about on the show a lot about, my history and my trauma journey and my recovery journey. And he has been such an intricate tool in helping me to understand that you can trust, and that there are people that you can trust. Now, there are boundaries that that needs to be in place, as he did when he introduced himself, or whenever he's working with women, he talk about his wife. Coach Mike, you want to talk a little bit about how we built this amazing relationship capital?
Right. And we never said we're going to set boundaries between one another. Right now, I'm going to just talk to the men first. Is that okay, Dr. Liz?
Absolutely.
Okay, you see, I called her Dr. Liz that time, but the majority of the time I call her Wellness Coach Liz, because she's a naturopathic doctor. So I just like to say Dr. Liz from time to time. But how we built our relationship started with me as a man understanding that, either married or single, these are still my philosophies. Men, you have to respect yourself first before you can respect a woman. And that means if nobody's watching, how are you going to show up and represent yourself in the world? Because everybody's watching, whether you realize it or not. Number two, I always talk about my wife first in my speeches on the global stages, so women will know that I am married, because I don't want women to think that I'm trying to do more than be an added value person in their lives, whether it's personal or business, because you're always going to build relationships. So that helps with the know, like, and trust factor. And then number three, I have sisters, I have moms, God rest her soul. I have cousins that are females. And my question to me is, how would I want somebody to treat them along with my wife? So I decided to adopt that rule. And when I speak about that, a lot of men said, Mike, you're breaking the man law code. I said, that's the problem. There were no women invited to the table, and we men kind of messed things up in the very beginning because that feminine energy, that sixth sense, that mother wit that we males were not born with. We don't have it. We can't manufacture it. I mean, we try, but we can't manufacture it to make it a simple nature, active nature that the creator put in women that he did not put in men. So by acknowledging that energy and not even allowing women, just give women the equal opportunity to be who they are, whether they're wearing flat shoes, high heel shoes, whether they're wearing a two-piece pantsuit or a skirt or a dress, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. A woman has so much to offer men whose minds are open like parachutes. And the reason men don't get it because their minds are closed and the parachute won't open when it's closed, will it? So the men who open up their minds like a parachute and see the value in a woman, besides having babies or besides allegedly being the woman who has to cook and clean the house for the man when he comes home. Here's another pro tip. My wife and I share home responsibilities. One week, I handle the house. She gets a break to handle business. The next week, she handles the house. I get a break to handle business. And then if there's an important situation going on, the other one just jumps in and handles the other one's responsibilities to make this thing work. And that's called work-life balance. And that's called men respecting women. Because women has done it all the time without us. So, it's on us, men.
Awesome. Awesome. Amazing. Amazing. Now you all see why he's my mentor, my business partner, my coach. He's all those things because he has just such amazing wisdom. And I just so appreciate you. And I always want to give you that, just to give you that gratitude and just tell you how much I appreciate you. This is so amazing in relationship capital. I tell you, we've been holding each other accountable for almost 4 years now, every day, and that's a part of trauma recovery as well. I mean, we all hold each other, have accountability partners, but in trauma recovery specifically, having that accountability partner really does help you to move forward and to not, helps you in your relapse prevention, because oftentimes when you're going through trauma recovery, you'll pick different things because your recovery is as individual as your fingerprint. And so in my recovery, overwhelm is the issue. Is kryptonite too to me, isolation and overwhelm. But you start to identify those things and you help yourself because you pull a self-care plan together. We have a support group, a pathway to trauma recovery support group that will help you so that you can have a safe place, a safe environment in order to start your recovery and in order to be safe in starting your recovery, because that's also a part of recovery, is finding finally a safe place. So, Coach Michael, how has trauma empowered and inspired you?
Oh, great question. It empowered me to really understand, number one, that trauma is not a economic issue. It's a global issue, just to keep it short. In our book, we have the beautiful country of South Africa represented. We have Norway represented. Thank you, Dr. Liz. And we also have Lebanon represented. And one of our writers in Lebanon, as I'm writing this, Beirut is being bombed. And she still was able to go through the trauma of hearing bombs drop, planes, which she would share her story. I'm just letting you know the type of people that we have in the book, so you can come on at each episode and purchase the book and read each person's story too. And that has affected all of our lives, but we're not going through it, but we know her and she's in our book. So we feel warmly about the things that she's going through as well. Our colleagues in London told me this morning that 1 in 5 people in London who work from home remotely suffer from trauma. And 91% of my colleagues in London has taken off work at least 2 or 3 times a week, and they're already off working remotely from home, which affects their financial income, which gives another part of trauma. So trauma affects all of us everywhere in the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we said it as we were going through, but as we're wrapping up, what would you say to someone faced with trauma?
I would say first, get some help. Excuse me.
Mhm.
Don't be afraid to seek help, because the number one, in my opinion, the number one problem with people with the trauma is sometimes you don't know that you have it, which is okay. But if you feel off square, off centered, off balanced, then it's something that's going on with you that a professional can help you with if you're willing to reach out and touch. Reach out and call, make a phone call, and just say, well, hey, I don't feel right about this. And let somebody go through the 7 layers of understanding, which is a deep test, but it's an easy test, because if you don't know why, a wellness coach or a CARC's coach, part of our role is to help identify or help you to identify it as well. Because once you identify it, then you understand what it is. And then because of our expertise and professionalism, we can help map out a plan to get you out of the darkness into the illuminating light along your pathway to trauma recovery.
Absolutely, absolutely. A couple of things that I wanted to say as we wrap up today. If you have Coach Michael Bart Mathews with your We Create Books, and I know you didn't know I was going to say this, but when we create books, we all have a story to tell. We Create Books help you to get your story out of your head so that it can be published and read. Coach Michael Bart Mathews' information will be in the description of this episode, and you will be able to get in contact with him if you would like help and assistance to get your book out. When I first started writing my first book, It's Smoothie Time, it is set on the shelf for many, many, many years. And I did not feel secure or safe to release it to anyone until I met the wonderful team at We Create Books. I kept the book on the shelf. Now, it was on the shelf since the 80s, y'all, really, right? So the book was out for a long time, but it did not get published. I did not become a published author or a best-selling author until I ran into the phenomenal team at We Create Books. So just wanted to let you know, if you want a safe place to for your manuscript to be developed or for you to move forward with that, contact Coach Michael Bart Mathews with We Create Books. And if you need help and assistance with just trying to see how do I navigate this trauma recovery, our team here can help you to do that. The information will be in the description, and you can contact us to be a part of the support group. And we have some really, really great free resources to help you. So we look forward to seeing you on the inside of our programs. Coach Michael, is there anything else that you wanted to leave our people with today?
Well, I just want to thank all of, first of all, I want to thank Wellness Coach Liz for inviting me here on the platform today to share part of my story. And I gave you the light part because we want you to read the full stories of all of us in the books. Second, I want to thank each and every one of the co-authors who did diligence and told their stories and came out of the darkness into the light to share, because our stories, it helped us and it's helping thousands and millions of people now. And that's the goal. We don't think local, we think global. And we want each and every one of you to have a better life, have a better mentality, have a better communications with yourself, better relationship building capital within the pages of Pathway to Trauma Recovery book. So if you can communicate with the Wellness Coach Liz to get your personal copy, and that would be suffice for me.
All righty. So we thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you on the inside of one of our programs or on the next episode of Get Trauma Informed. All righty. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
It's time to buckle up. No more suffering in silence. Our Power Pack journey to recovery and realignment starts now. Remember, you were collateral damage on someone else's warpath. Trauma is not your fault. Recovery, however, is your responsibility. I'm your host, Wellness Coach Liz Blanding, and this is the Get Trauma Informed podcast.